And hello everybody out there. Welcome to the Forrest & Company webinar, What to Do with the Top 5 Barriers to Innovation, also known as Clearing the Road and Stepping on the Gas. My name is Michael Clark, Director of Sales and Marketing here at Forrest & Company, and I will be your moderator. With me is, of course, Julian Chapman, Forrest's EVP Consulting and Business Solutions. Welcome, Julian.
Thanks, Michael. Welcome, everyone.
Firstly, for everyone, here's some housekeeping. This webinar will be 45 minutes long, including a few minutes for Q&A at the end. I've muted everyone's mic so that we're not talking on top of each other. Please hang on to your questions until the Q&A. Nevertheless, you can send me your questions via the question box in your GoToWebinar interface. Just to let you know, I'm very pleased to announce this is an international webinar. I'd like to say hello to our friends in Kuwait and our friend in Nigeria. Thanks for tuning in. I don't know what time it is over there, but nice of you to tune in the evening. Finally, to all registered attendees, I will forward to you a copy of Julian's presentation. This will let you concentrate on listening to Julian's dulcet tones instead of note-taking, unless note-taking is your thing. So it is with great pleasure, Julian. The mic's over to you.
Thanks very much, Michael. Good afternoon, everyone, again. So today we're going to talk about the top 5 barriers to innovation. And specifically, our agenda today is what is innovation really, and the top 5 barriers to successful innovation, and what breaks those barriers. Our goal is we want to help you to not just remove the barriers, but replace those barriers with processes that will accelerate the innovation inside your organization. It's kind of a 1-2 punch for innovation, as we like to put it. So in other words, we're going to be clearing the road and stepping on the gas. So you'll get a bit of the analogy today. It's going to be about roads, roadworks, because we're here in Toronto, and that's all we seem to talk about these days.
The summer of 2014.
So what is innovation really? Many of our clients throw the word around with impunity. As with all business words, it takes on a life of its own. Business word bingo is often the phrase. With senior management, they tend to be self-assured that everyone knows what they mean, but do they really know what they mean? Does this innovation mean we have new ideas and are creative? I often hear that, Michael. Yeah. Does it mean we are cutting edge? Does it mean we're bleeding edge? Is no idea bad? Are we a learning organization? These are all examples of innovation, and when they're applied to corporate values, these become noun descriptors.
Okay.
So they're often used in the realm of corporate values. So we need a definition and a common one. We refer to it as getting something new in novus. It's different from invention. And so today we're going to be talking about getting something new in, not the invention side. It has to do with getting something new in the organization or in the market. So it is about bringing in new. That said, not all new is good. And we'll talk a bit more about that a little later on. It comes from the Latin novus, new or strange. We find it is very useful with our clients to go back to the roots of words because it helps people to have a common understanding. Innovation as tied to the corporate strategy equals in plus novus, getting something into the market or within the organization. If you pay any attention to the media these days, what we hear is that Canada lacks innovation. Corporations make a value of innovation, and yet at the same time they really don't necessarily understand what they're talking about. They're using the words. So one of the things to perhaps take away is, what is our definition of innovation in the organization that I have to work in? So why do we have this difficulty with making a corporate value? Why are we seen as a non-innovative nation? Well, allow me to introduce some early work done by the electronics giant Royal Philips in the Netherlands, who struggled with this issue over 30 years ago. After all, once you conceive of a light bulb, where do you go from there? And interestingly enough, Michael, I was thinking about it this morning as I brushed my teeth with my Philips toothbrush, electric toothbrush, used by Philips shaver. Those are far from light bulbs. But Philips focused on this over 30 years ago.
And managed to survive and flourish in the European economy, which high-wage, perhaps low productivity.
Exactly. So here is our perspective on this, and this is based on the work that Philips did. So in the 1980s, Philips set about to be more innovative. They saw that they had to be competitive. They had to win in the marketplace. So they studied the dynamic of their organization. They were quick to realize that there were three issues. The first issue is that innovation issues are not necessarily invention problems. It's not about the invention. The second thing that they realized was that thinking is at the core to innovation. And the third thing that they realized was acceptance by others was the real challenge to inventions. So if it isn't about the invention, it's about the acceptance of the invention. As Philips tried to solve why they could not be more innovative, they noticed a dynamic that occurred. Their issue with innovation had nothing to do originally with innovation outside the business, but rather inside the business.
Okay.
So we have to pave the way on the road internally before we take it externally.
That's a very good metaphor, Julian.
A new idea, created or developed, it is then worked on and tested and then pushed out of its incubator. The big issue is that it is unfamiliar to all others. It's developed in another department in a lot of cases, an R&D department potentially, or it could be an IT department, it could be a human resource department, it could be a logistics department, you name it. The big issue is that they're unfamiliar with it. It runs into judgment from others. Very few new ideas get accepted outright. This was one of the findings of Philips, which in turn becomes an acceptance wall or a boundary. For Philips, the issue was how to make it familiar. How do you make it familiar? In other words, how do you use data communication in a way to describe the new thing and where the new thing came from and all of the background on the new thing? In all cases, this is the issue with innovation.
It's sort of it's actually making the new not new any longer by filling in all the blanks.
Exactly, making me familiar with it. So getting novice in, whether in the market or organization, requires this familiarity bridge. Hence, we have marketing departments, or internally we talk about socializing our idea.
Right.
The other important aspect from Philips was the relationship to thinking. Whether you have a new idea that you need to sell to others to get their buy-in, in other words, to get them to buy it, or whether you need to get your team on board with a new tool, regardless of whether you have the authority for it or not, or whether you need to get a new product in the market or revamp your business, it is thinking that drives it all. These all move up and are iterations of one another. Bringing in something new is about change. It is about moving from a current state to a future state. Regardless, it is about your thinking. And it is that thinking that defines what the change is and how you will bring it about. As an aside, when I say thinking today, I just want to be clear. It's not just your cognitive, but also your affective thinking. How you use your mind and your heart to do something new, to bring something new in. And here's how it works. Getting your idea accepted inside your organization is fraught with challenges of thinking. So to understand the dynamic, let's look at how we move from thinking to getting results. There is a visible and an invisible world that you live in. Invisible to others and also visible to them at the same time. Your thinking, where you get that idea from for that new thing you want to bring in, occurs in the invisible realm. It can be based on analysis, or it can come from inspiration. As your thinking muscles work away, you come to, in fact, a conclusion to act on that idea or that analysis. This becomes your thought. There's a close relationship to the quality of the idea as well, as I mentioned earlier. No matter how good the thinking and thought may be, it is still very hard to get acceptance, as we talked about as well earlier. Being invisible makes it even harder. All of these are in the invisible realm. No one is clear where they came from. It's unfamiliar to them. Your action is unusual. Not only is it against the status quo or stasis, but as far as others are concerned, it just came out of thin air.
Right.
If you go on, you will get results. But if you can't make it visible, then there will be a visceral response from others.
If you can't make your thinking and your thoughts visible. I see. Okay.
Because your thinking and thoughts are definitely not theirs.
Right.
The point of this is to show you just how difficult it can be for organizations to get new in. I suggested to you that when an organization says they value innovation, it is getting new ideas in, just so that they can have an impact in their market. So it is an internal issue, just as Phillips found. If you're in the public sector, the same is true. I'm not sure how many public sector people we have with us today, but you need new ideas. As time goes on, as the organization grows, and no offense to those individuals,
none taken,
there will be a careful balance of old and new ways, which will be further exacerbated if we can't make the ideas visible. So, what is it that's getting in the way of new coming in? What is stopping us from being innovative? These are the top 5 barriers. These are what we see as the top 5 barriers in the road. The road work, the construction, the barricades, the orange cones, you name it. It's based on 26 years of working with firms and 14 years of looking at thinking inside organizations. This list is not exhaustive, and regardless of the level of the organization that you're in, and regardless of your sector, these impact. These are barriers. What we see are the important ones that we should all be aware of are these. I should also point out that this is what organization survival is all about. Okay. Overcoming these barriers to get to new on that roadway. Getting good at spotting these as issues will ensure that your organization survives in the future.
Julian, when you say organization, what are you referring to? Is there levels in there?
Well, Michael, when I say organization, and this is for everyone, when I'm talking about organization, it's organization or team. It could be your team, it could be your company, it could be your department, it could be that other person that works with you.
Right, okay.
So it's about organization as a whole. So when we're talking about the survival of the organization, overcoming the barriers for your team, for your department, for your company,
or in your
is critical.
Right.
So let's get on to the barriers. The first one, barrier number 1. Strategy disconnection covers a broad spectrum of issues. Interestingly enough, yet again, the word strategy is another one of those business words that's tossed about. We use it to mean different things. I listened to a teacher talking to one of my children the other day, talking about the strategy they would use in playing cards. Now, mind you, it was fish, but they still referred to that as a strategy. So it's time for another definition. Strategy is about our vision, our values, our mission, and our objectives. Strategy disconnection is about us breaking with our strategy and then not going somewhere that is not what we are all about. We are breaking out into a realm that is not key to us. This represents bad thinking. In our experience, there are more disconnections from strategy than there should be. And while the front-wheel drive vehicle can continue to drive when it's split like this, it has a problem getting to its destination.
Intact, obviously, yes.
So some of the causes are thinking processes that go into strategy. Many companies that we've worked with pay lip service to their strategy. It is a process that is to be gone through, and as a result, vast sums of money are spent to create strategies. But in the end, no one really follows them. They become the placemat on the wall.
Right.
Another cause is we have a bright idea, but don't think it through and come to the right conclusion. This is part of the invention issue. But it's still tried to strategy because it's a disconnection. And then the third one is we have an opportunity that's not related to our core business. Organizations that thrive by mergers and acquisitions need to be heedful of this particular issue. For example, did we just buy a business that does not represent what we're really all about?
So who is accountable for strategy within an organization? And who's accountable for that strategy connection top to bottom?
Well, I would argue that it starts at the top. It starts with the CEO, and it is the accountability of every manager throughout the organization to drive the strategy.
Right.
And so when you have a disconnection from strategy, as we often see, it means that the strategy is not cascading down. Managers aren't taking their chunk and making it real to their direct reports. As you've often heard me say, Michael, there's no bad organizations, only bad managers. But enough of that. So, clearing the road and stepping on the gas, how do you overcome these? Well, are we clear on our strategy? The emphasis is on having a real strategy that we can implement. But also, at the same time, are we all clear? Does our strategy cascade, or is it the purview of the executive only? Is it, for example, the corporate meeting where the CEO stands in front of everyone and outlines the strategy, thereby neutering all of the managers underneath? The next way to clear the road and step on the gas is determine what is core. Is this core to our business? Is this just a great idea? There are some great ideas, and trust me, I've gone after them in the past, but is it really our work? Is it really what we should be doing? The next is we need to confirm the direction. Is this really where we want to go into the future? Can you think forward? Can you think around corners? Will this take us really where we want to go? Sometimes those great ideas are truly great, but sober second thought of implication is important. And then finally, is this how we want to represent ourselves? Does this meet our values as much as our mission? Clarifying values is critical. So that's the first of our barriers and our way to clear the barrier. Failure to implement, the second barrier, manifests itself in a number of ways. If I had a nickel for every time a CEO says that we just can't implement, I'd be a rich man indeed. Failure to launch, as it is so often called, is about alignment behind the plan. And as you can see by the picture we've got here, this is about chaos. This is about the chaos that occurs. And the only way to overcome that chaos is through planning. So I would suggest to you that failure to implement is a lack of planning. Planning is another one of those words that's not well understood. Plan seems to me to be a four-letter word, and in many organizations it's seen that way. As a sidebar, when a CEO says we can't implement, it usually means we didn't hit the markers we set. My retort back to them is, how good were the markers? And that is the indicator of the planning. Quite often when I say that, of course, I get stymied silence, right, and they go, oh yeah, wait a minute, maybe we didn't plan that well enough. Now, how this manifests itself in bringing something new in, A, is that there is not enough time to deliver the new thing. B is there are not enough resources available to implement. And C is it's unclear who is to do what, and we spend too much time in meetings as we try to get our project moving forward. That was a bit of a sidebar again, but we're not clear on who's to do what. All of these represent a lack of planning, forethought. Did we really think it through and align the organization behind it? As you can probably see, there's an overlap with strategy disconnection. Because that if we don't align the organization, then you have no chance of getting your new in or to get to where you want to be. So to clear the road and step on the gas, and of course you're going to have to clear the road here before you can step on the gas. How will we implement this? In other words, not the goal, but the steps on the way to success. Have we thought this through? Have we put our best efforts into our thinking, and are our thoughts right? Do we have the resources necessary to implement? And if not, what is required? Just because I may not now have those resources does not mean that I won't get the resources if it is tied to the strategy. And again, here's an important part of making your thinking visible. Because if I can't show you that I really don't have the resources, you'll just assume that I'm a resource monger. Right. And then finally, the last piece is about aligning everyone. Have we aligned everyone with clarity of rules and, more importantly, authority? Nothing gets done without human beings, strangely enough. So you need to align them and provide clarity, not just on the work, but what is their authority in order to do that work. That's an important part that human beings need. So our third barrier is disintegration. Disintegration is related to the first two, because without relation to strategy and careful planning, we will in fact be all over the road. But disintegration can occur on its own because it is about not having new approaches integrated in the organization. There is no focus and single-minded determination. There is what I refer to as diffusion. And anybody that drives in Toronto these days has probably got a sense of why this picture is up there, because there is diffusion. Too many roadworks occurring. In other words, we're lacking our integrity. We're falling apart. So some of the manifestations of diffusion are, number one, in some cases there are too many things happening at once. This can make organizations very change-weary.
I imagine especially for those roles that are like choke points for change, heads of mines, for example, or heads of departments that are geographically isolated.
I just came from seeing someone today who his issue that his peers have is that his team is creating too many new things and they can't keep up. The second is that there are policies and procedures that work against anything new being implemented. And the third is we're not aligned on priorities. One client of ours liked to leave it to their people to sort it out. And in one case, they set about creating competition internally for resources. Because as we all know, competition's good.
Right.
Needless to say, that organization does not exist in its current form any longer. So for an example, This photo of the summer of 2014 in Toronto road construction is, again, as I said, that aspect of disintegration. Another case in point was a major retailer that had a strong head office who really wanted to help their stores. Each department was mandated to develop projects to help the field. And in most cases, each had no more than 3 projects. But when 8 departments got together and all produced their projects, it meant that there were over 20 new projects landing on the store manager's door at once, all on top of their day-to-day work. That makes it difficult to have successful innovation, have successful new getting in, because you've swamped them. So what happens when your new approach you're trying to get meets the systems that stymie it? Let me tell you, not only do you have people rejecting your new idea because it is unfamiliar, but also because it threatens the status quo. Just imagine how many of those ideas get through. And then just think how this issue is troubled by lack of alignment amongst leaders who are competing for resources. Many successful companies develop strict gating processes to make sure that overzealousness and the good idea fairy doesn't make it impossible to deliver. So let's clear the road and step on the gas. How much change can we handle at once? Do we need a gating system, and whose job is that? Is it the CEO? Is it management in general? Is it a department? Those decisions have to be made. Is our idea running against the existing system, and how will we overcome it? In many cases, innovations need to kick over sacred cows. But have we thought through them in our response when our actions threaten others' stasis? So in other words, when we kick over those old policies and procedures in our process. And finally, is our leadership team holding people accountable for implementing this? No new in can occur without management sanction, because it is the work of management to drive this. They drive the strategy, and the planning is their work. So they have to all be on board. So that's our lack of integration, number 3. Barrier number 4 is risk aversion. Risk is a big black cloud, and every decision has that big black cloud hanging over it. That cloud is risk. Its human manifestation is actually fear. Fear is debilitating. When the emotional side of your thinking overcomes your cognitive processes, then fear is king. You're getting stuck in the mud.
Or the fear of being stuck in the mud.
It is much safer to rely on what we have always done, because the risk of new is it is unproven. I may not be in charge, but I still see new as a threat to my safety. Risk aversion manifests itself in overanalysis or analysis paralysis. One CEO that I worked with felt that this was what stifled all of the new approaches inside his organization. In our experience, it is because we have no processes for decision making and lack confidence in the decisions that are made. The question that I like to ask groups is, how many of you make decisions? Usually every hand goes up. The second question is, how many of you have been taught how to make a decision? Actually, Michael, we've got a number of people out there. Why don't we try this as a poll?
All right, I'm going to throw open.
So how many of you out there have been taught how to make a decision? That means sitting in a class or having someone actually teach you.
Okay, we've got it up and waiting for some responses.
This lack of decision making is one of the biggest problems that's impacting organizations. Forgetting innovation. It's how good are we at decision making?
Okay, Julian, I think we've got everything in here now. I mean, overwhelmingly, no, but there is someone here who's actually being trained. I have to drill down on that. I would love to know how. Thank you for that, everybody. I'm just going to close that down.
Well, regardless of strategy, planning, and alignment, the core issue with new in is, in fact, risk. So here's my premise. When we aren't sure how to make a decision, it becomes risky and fear sets in. So to clear the road and get on with it and step on the gas, you need to think better. How do you make a decision? Am I clear on the system that is in place for me and others in decision making? By the way, if I get good at decision making, I will have better ideas. If I can show you how I made my decisions, you will accept it more likely, and I will be better at getting that new in. How can we make this a replicatable process? How do we make the system work for today and tomorrow? Move from your heart to your head. What is the worst thing that can happen? What is the likelihood and severity? Here is the core of your risk assessment for anything you do. Get good at this, and you will be cruising through innovation.
So it's interesting, Julie, when you're talking about so risk aversion being entirely a function of the lack of being able to make a good decision. And by a good decision, I mean a complete decision.
Well, if fear sets in my heart and in my soul, how does my brain engage to make a decision? The brain has to overcome the body in this case. Analogy that I like to use is when the police train their policemen and women to respond to someone who has a weapon, they teach them to breathe. In other words, their mind takes over their body.
Okay.
The same thing holds true if you're in an emotional event. Focus on your breathing. So Michael, if you're going to go home and watch Old Yeller tonight, focus on your breathing, because you can bring your body into control. And so the same thing bears true here. So it's how do we use our mind to overcome our innate reaction. And that last point, getting in your head, considering what is the worst thing that can happen, is an important step here. Because so often, that barrier to the new idea can be the barrier inside my head.
Right.
So what's the worst thing that can happen if I come forward with my idea, my invention? What's the likelihood of that happening? And what's the severity if it happens? All too often we don't do the risk assessment in likelihood and the risk assessment in severity, and we miss the opportunity because our fear has stymied our ability to think through the problem. So this brings us to our final barrier, the inability to get buy-in. Finally, the biggest reason that innovation fails is that we don't get others on board with our new thinking. How do you make the sale? Whether this is a new product in the market or a new process inside our organization, if we can't get others to see the value, they won't buy it. If it does not meet their needs, they won't buy it. And if they do actually end up buying it and it doesn't meet their needs, they will have buyer's remorse.
Right.
And you end up with a win-lose negotiation. So there's no point in pushing something in necessarily unless it's part of the strategy that others don't see the need for. Strategy is king here. It has to be tied to the strategy. So there are lots of times when you have to announce new things that will have an impact on the organization, but people see that it's not the need. For example, if we have to change our structure and it has an impact on people, you are bringing an innovation into the organization. You need to make sure that it's tied to the strategy. Because after all, we exist in our organizations, either the public sector or the private sector, to fulfill the strategy of the organization. If I cannot demonstrate the value to you, then maybe it doesn't deserve to exist. There are many late-night infomercials or quick, handy commercials that I see of products that don't add value to me, and so therefore I'm not going to buy them. The same holds true. How do I get you to see its worth and to actually want it? I have to sell it to you. In my experience, sell is another four-letter word, only this time it starts with S. Even if I have the authority, if I make no effort to sell it to you, you will continue to resist. And maybe not initially, but instead, when I least expect it, it pops up as a barrier. But let's be clear, buy-in is not a substitute for holding others accountable. Too many leaders are stalled by their fear of not having the buy-in of their direct reports. I'm not talking about a manager-direct report relationship here. That's not what I'm talking about in buy-in. It's useful for people to see the value, but a manager has a job to do. And I don't want to necessarily take us down that path at this time. We'll save that for a later webinar.
All right.
This buy-in part, though, has led to a whole cottage industry on change management, or socializing your idea, or even marketing for that matter. No offense, Michael.
None taken.
So let's clear the road and get on with it to reach our maximum speed. If you're accountable, step up. You have a job to do. You'll have an easier time by selling, but you have to use your judgment and discretion. And there is a fine line between buy-in and accountability. Again, but more on that at a later time. You need to remind yourself that you have a job to do and to get on with it. How can I sell my idea so others accept it more readily? Well, think in terms of selling your ideas all the time. Regardless of your role or authority, sell, sell, and sell again. The point around thinking in terms of selling is if you think in those terms and you do that in your day-to-day work with your peers, you will find that it's so much easier to get your new ideas in. You build a skill set as you're doing it. Have I really made sure that what it is that I'm trying to sell to you is related to you and your work? Make sure that it is related to, and ideally, and most importantly, the strategy. How have I made my thinking visible to others to engage them? This is the result of thinking of selling. Showing your thinking is about the human aspect of helping them to relate to what you're bringing about. It's not about manipulating them.
It's got to do with that familiarity bridge. It's more like filling in all the blanks.
Exactly. So what's getting in the way of new coming in? What's stopping us from being innovative? Well, here they are again, the points that we talked about. The first three are table stakes to innovation occurring in an organization. They represent the strategic and operational level of innovation. You need to have the strategy connected. You need to be able to implement, and it needs to be integrated. The last two represent the human condition because they get in the way at the tactical level for all human beings, regardless of their role in the organization and their level. So get good at your decisions and sell your ideas. They are what we see as the top 5, based on 26 years of working with firms and 14 years of looking at thinking inside organizations. As I said before, they're not exhaustive. And regardless of the level you are in the organization and regardless of the sector, they are important. I want to reaffirm again that this is what survival for an organization is all about. It is about overcoming the barriers to new. How many of these represent your world? We look forward to hearing from you. So our goal today was to cover these off. We wanted to help you to not just remove the barriers, but replace those barriers with processes that will accelerate innovation. Again, that 1-2 punch for innovation. In other words, clearing the road and stepping on the gas.
Great. Thank you very much, Julian. Thank you. I think we've all got a better handle on getting the new in, which is grammatically dangerous, but a really catchy phrase. So thank you very much, and thank you to all our attendees. Before we go, of course, what I'm going to do is going to throw it out to some Q&A. Does anybody, if anybody's got a question that they'd like to throw to Julian, please enter it in the question dialog box in your GoToWebinar interface. While we're waiting for that to come down, though, Julian, I just wanted to talk to you about within a team. So you've got a manager-direct report relationship where theoretically you could actually you have the authority to force change on somebody. And other times when you're dealing with peers, you might need to convince someone. But is there any tools that you would suggest to go about doing that?
Well, I think there's a couple of ways of looking at this. One way is to look at it through the lens of, do I actually sell my ideas to my peers? Even if I'm in a team, I should probably sell my new ideas. That way they will accept them more readily. Another way to look at that is, if we take it away from the individual level, as the manager of that team, have I clarified the authority aspect of that? In other words, have I clarified what sort of authority someone should have? And then when we look at the organization overall, what is that individual accountable for, and what sort of authorities do they have in order to bring those new things in? So all of those begin to pave the way for new coming into the organization.
Okay. Another thing, I actually got a question in here. Have you ever heard of a Chief Innovation Officer? And can you actually take I suppose what's coming out of this question is can you take innovation out of the line and make it the property of a particular office?
Well, that is an important question, and I briefly touched on it, because what sometimes happens is we look at a gating process. So a Chief Innovation Officer is usually a way to gate the number of ideas that are going through.
Oh, okay.
Sometimes they'll use it as a process to look at how good is the idea. But in other cases, they will look at how do we resource that idea so that we can't have a lot of different new ideas occurring simultaneously. So the role of the Chief Innovation Officer is to do that. That's when our strategy is about innovation.
Okay, I see.
There's another element to this where continuous improvement is an element of innovation. In other words, I'm finding new ways to do things all along. Continuous improvement is the germination of invention, because it is that point. I see an opportunity for something to be improved. So what we recommend to our clients is you make continuous improvement, the practicing of continuous improvement, the accountability of a manager.
Of all managers.
All managers throughout the organization, so that we're continually improving. As it moves up in the organization, by the time you get to the director level in an organization, you're looking at process. As by the time you get to the vice president level, you're looking at new products. When you get to the SVP or the executive levels of the organization, you're looking at new lines of business.
Okay.
All of those are levels of innovation, but they start with that germination of continuous improvement as the accountability for every manager inside the organization.
Okay. All right. Well, I think that's all the time we have. There's a couple more questions here that I'll answer offline, but Julian, thank you very much again. And thank you all to our attendees again. You've been listening to Julian Chapman talk to us today about what to do with the top 5 barriers to innovation, clearing the road and stepping on the gas. This has been a Forrest & Company webinar, part of our growing list of resources available through our Forest Fire webpage. To sign up for Forest Fire Communications Group, visit us at the website, visit us at our website, click on the Communications Group button. Registration is free, and you can unsubscribe at any time, but it's our job to make sure you don't want to. Thanks very much, everybody, and have a great day.